The sky was completely black, the kind of darkness that didn't just hide shapes but erased certainty itself, where pilots crossed vast distances guided only by instinct, maps, and fragile hope, believing the night was still their greatest ally, believing they could move through invisible borders unseen, undetected, unstoppable, just as armies and fleets had done for centuries, because up until that moment, war still belonged to those who struck first, to those who emerged from nothing, to those who turned silence into destruction without warning. And that was the way it worked, until something began to change, something no one could see, no one could touch, yet powerful enough to redefine the battlefield forever, a shift as silent as the night itself, but far more dangerous, because for the first time in history, it no longer mattered how dark it was or how far away you thought you were. Someone could already be watching you, and you would have no idea. Before that shift, war was a calculated blindness, a system built on uncertainty where commanders made decisions with incomplete information, where steel warships vanished in a fog like ghosts and entire cities could be caught off guard in a matter of minutes, without warning, without preparation, because there simply was no reliable way to detect an incoming threat before it was too close. And this wasn't considered a flaw. It was the system itself. Surprise was not just an advantage, it was the foundation of victory. And because of that, fear didn't come only from the enemy. It came from the unknown, from the constant possibility that something was already moving toward you, hidden by distance, protected by darkness, advancing silently until the exact moment when it would be far too late to react. It was in this world of uncertainty that an idea emerged, one that sounded almost impossible, almost absurd at first, the idea that perhaps vision did not have to depend on light, that perhaps there was a way to detect objects across great distances using something invisible, something that could travel through the night, through clouds, through storms, and return with information precise enough to reveal what could not be seen, as if the environment itself could betray the presence of the enemy. And although many dismissed it in the beginning, the growing tension in the world made it impossible to ignore, because war was evolving, and with it came the urgent need to anticipate the next move before it happened. Early experiments were far from perfect, often confusing, screens flickering with unstable signals, points appearing and disappearing without clear explanation, like echoes of something not yet fully understood, and for a time it seemed unreliable, something that might never be trusted in real combat. But what few realized in that moment was that even in its imperfect state, this technology already represented something revolutionary, because for the first time, there was a way, however incomplete, to know that something was coming before it could be seen, and that alone was enough to begin changing the logic of war. As the World War II escalated, this fragile innovation became a strategic necessity, a race against time where every improvement could mean the difference between being surprised or being prepared, and gradually, systems began to take shape, connecting detection points across vulnerable regions, forming an early network that created something entirely new, a shared awareness that did not rely on human sight, but on signals, interpretation, and rapid decision-making, turning scattered data into actionable knowledge in real time. It was during the Battle of Britain that this technology proved its true value, when operators sitting in dimly lit rooms, staring at glowing screens filled with uncertain signals, began to recognize patterns, movements, coordinated formations approaching from miles away, far beyond visual range, far beyond hearing, yet unmistakably present. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened, not because the enemy had changed their strategy, but because for the first time, someone knew exactly what was coming before it arrived, allowing defenses to respond in advance, allowing fighters to be launched at the right time, allowing reaction to become anticipation. That shift changed everything, because it stripped away the most powerful advantage of surprise, reducing uncertainty and introducing a new dimension into warfare. Time itself, no longer something lost in confusion, but something gained through knowledge. Seconds that once did not exist now became decisive. Minutes that once were impossible now determined outcomes. And with that, war began to transform into something fundamentally different, something where information could outweigh brute force, where knowing first often meant winning before the battle even began. But the most profound impact was not purely technological. It was psychological, because from that moment forward, the idea of invisibility began to collapse, not completely, but enough to change how every mission was perceived, because now every movement carried a question, not about what could be seen, but about what might already be detected. And that question, silent and persistent, became a constant presence. A new kind of pressure that did not rely on direct confrontation, but on the possibility that the enemy already knew where you were. Over time, this capability expanded far beyond its original purpose, influencing air defense systems, naval operations, guided weaponry, and countless other technologies built on the same principle of detection and anticipation, creating a chain reaction that reshaped warfare on a global scale. Because once the ability to detect at distance existed, there was no going back, no returning to a world where darkness guaranteed safety or where distance ensured invisibility. In the end, war did not stop. Conflicts continued, new technologies emerged, strategies evolved, but something fundamental had been lost forever: the illusion that it was possible to remain completely hidden, the belief that night could provide true protection, the assumption that distance meant safety, because from that moment on, the battlefield was no longer defined by what could be seen, but by what could be detected. And that silent transformation became one of the most powerful turning points in modern history, not because it ended wars, but because it changed their very nature, turning the unknown into something increasingly rare and invisibility into something increasingly difficult to achieve. And that is how, not through a single explosion or a single decisive moment, but through a quiet and relentless shift, war stopped being a game of shadows and became a game of information, where the true advantage no longer belonged to those who could hide, but to those who could see first, because in that new reality, the greatest power was not invisibility. It was making sure that no one else could ever rely on it again. If you found this story as powerful as I did, consider subscribing to the channel. There are many moments in history like this, moments that almost changed everything. And if you enjoyed the video, a simple like really helps more people discover these stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.